Hello everybody, this is Pat with video number 8, a response to James Baber and his channel devoted to defeating Adventism. His response today is the unbelievable Seventh-day Adventists have two inspired sources. In today's video, I'm actually both going to agree with James and disagree with James at the same time, even though that seems contradictory. Let's see what he has to say.
So, do Seventh-day Adventists actually believe in sola scriptura? In other words, one inspired source? No, they don't.
All right, in this particular video, James is going to point out something. He's going to say that the Seventh-day Adventist Church does not trust the Bible and the Bible alone, which is true. They have the writings of Ellen White. Let's see what he has to say.
We're going to first look here at this magazine of theirs, this Advent Review magazine from May of 2023. Look with me here. The Spirit of Prophecy, which is Ellen White.
All right, here's the one and only issue I have with the Seventh-day Adventist Church calling Ellen White the Spirit of Prophecy. Now, the reason why I actually believe that this church does have the spirit of prophecy is because they're really the only church left that is providing the tying together of the book of Daniel and Revelation, which allows us to understand the book of Revelation. It allows us to understand current events, future events. It explains the mark of the beast. It unravels the complexities of Revelation that seem to make no sense on the surface. Because of that, they do have the spirit of prophecy because they're teaching prophecy in a way that no one is. The thing I don't like about them in regard to the spirit of prophecy is that they claim that Ellen White is the spirit of prophecy because that's what they call her. Now, if you go to the book of Revelation, it says that these are the ones that have the keep the commandments and have the faith of Jesus. And then later on, it makes the same statement, but it says this is the spirit of prophecy. My problem with that is it's almost as if the church is saying these are the ones that have the faith of Jesus and the writings of Ellen White based on the way that they present her. That may not be what they believe, but that's how it comes across.
Provides numerous books and general statements of educational philosophy that Adventists believe are inspired by God.
Okay, so what? Her writings and teachings are inspired by God. What's the problem with that? What about all of the people who wrote the New Testament? They were inspired by God.
They do the same thing again here in their 28 Beliefs book on page 261, which says this. She, Ellen White, has given inspired instruction for God's people living during the time of the end.
All right, inspired instruction. The entire New Testament is inspired instruction. Why would you think that God would not continue to do that sort of pattern in the future when it actually says he would in the Bible? I'll point those things out in a minute.
And then you can see there, she delivers God's messages.
Okay, so what? She delivers God's messages. Anytime anybody gets behind a pulpit at a church, regardless of their denomination, what are they doing? They're delivering God's messages.
Well, Seventh-day Adventists knows that sola scriptura is a problem. Look here at this ministry magazine from 1987. Why I don't believe in sola scriptura? Of course they can't believe in it. Because if you're an Adventist, you have two inspired sources.
That's right. Two sources. I do not know of a single denomination that doesn't have two sources because each denomination has a founder. If you're Baptist, the one who is establishing what your theology is John Smith and Roger Williams. So they're choosing to use those two men and the Bible. That's not the Bible alone. What about Methodists? Their theology is founded on John Wesley. That is not the Bible alone, James. That is Wesley plus the Bible. What about Pentecostals? They get their theology from a gentleman named Charles Parham. That's not the Bible alone, James. That's the theology comes from a man and the Bible. That's not Scripture and Scripture alone. Pointing out that idea, I'm curious as to know what your denomination is, James. I find it odd that you don't have that information posted. I wonder why.
Not just this one right here, which is the Bible, but you got two.
All right, I just pointed out that everyone has two.
Stay away from Seventh-day Adventism.
Okay, so when it comes to prophecy, the idea that Ellen White brings new information in, the Bible actually says that people will bring new information in. Joel 2:28 through 32 says that your sons and daughters shall prophesy. Acts 2:17 and 18 reiterates that entire thing in Joel, and it says your sons and daughters shall prophesy. 2 Timothy 3:1 through 4 is actually an example of the New Testament bringing new information in that is not part of the existing scriptures. Is that not, in sense, a prophecy? What about prophecy in the future? Matthew 24:6 through 9. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. Now, if James does not believe that prophecy it will exist in the future, he thinks that it was something that only happened back in the day, it's done away with, it's one of the gifts that no longer exists. Well, does James believe that the thing that Jesus just said about you being hated by all nations is just something that was only back in the day and is not going to be in the future? I would think not. So what about the gifts of the Spirit? You know, First Corinthians 12:10, it goes through the gifts, and one of the gifts is the spirit of prophecy. Romans 12, it also talks about the gifts, and one of the gifts that it talks about is the gift of prophecy. Now, prophecy, regardless of how the Seventh-day Adventist Church uses it through this person, is the idea that you're presenting extra material outside of the Bible alone. Now, the question is, does that extra material contradict the Bible? If it does not contradict the Bible, then there's no problem with it. However, it is not sola scriptura. It is not Scripture alone. It is the Bible plus this additional information. So that's the question, is why does the Seventh-day Adventist Church say that phrase so much? Sola scriptura, sola scriptura, sola scriptura, Scripture alone, when they themselves know that they don't do that. They have the writings of Ellen White plus the Bible. Why would anyone say the Bible alone when every denomination uses the Bible plus the theology of people that became before them? Why would anybody use that phrase when they know that Scripture says that in the future there will be new insights and additional information that will rise from people who prophesy outside of Scripture that will essentially be an additional aspect of information that is a continuation of what the Scripture has to say? Doesn't seem to make sense. One, I agree with James. It's frustrating that they claim Scripture and Scripture alone when it's true that they don't. However, I disagree with James when he argues that people should stay away from this church because they have two sources. Every single church has two sources.